Hello and welcome to the Objective Music Report, the only source of objectively correct music opinions on the entire internet. Today we're talking about Revolution 9 and why I think it is the most overhated Beatles song.
Right, 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 right.
Now, if you're not a fan of the song, I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to convince you at the end of this video. I'm not going to pretend that you're going to turn it off, and after hearing my analysis, you're going to all of a sudden, enjoy the experience of listening to the song. No, what I am saying though is I think it is overlooked, and I think people do hate on it without understanding a lot of what it's contributing to on the White Album, which I think is one of the Beatles' greatest records. But I think to understand, of course, the contribution it makes to that record, you gotta first understand the record itself. Now, the Beatles' self-titled album, the White Album, whatever you want to call it, their 9th or 10th studio album, depending on how you count, it is probably their most confounding record and most deliberately strange out of anything they've ever released. I think the most pivotal moment for me when I first started listening to the Beatles music and understanding this album was seeing the contrast between, the preceding album's artwork, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and the White Album. Sgt. Pepper's, you have a very almost messy, colorful, vibrant, massive collage of, every influence the Beatles have ever had. This massive portrayal of theatrical proportions. And in the White Album, you have just the name of the band and essentially nothing else. The back cover has pictures of the bandmates, but they're not even in a shared photo like they had in previously. Now, of course, the differences between these two records extend to the music itself. There's lots of different genres being portrayed on both of them, different styles, different tones, but the White Album doesn't really seem to have a major overarching theme or reason. Sgt. Pepper's, of course, has the concept of, being a hypothetical, made-up band, and while, the songs do go into different diverse directions, they're still like in that universe of this goofy, whimsical, theatrical band. Whereas the White Album, not only is it, not masquerading as this hypothetical non-Beatles band, it literally is, quote unquote, the Beatles. It is them pushing, they decided to put this record out there, knowing this is their name on it, this is what they think is the, encapsulation of who they are. Now, one could criticize, this album for, not having a major overarching reason, overarching theme, overarching, message. But I think that's kind of the point in naming it The Beatles. Because at the time, the band, of course, they have a very, very publicized history. At the time, they were starting to fracture, lots of bouts, fights, whatever. And they were all moving in different creative directions, all of the band members. And so with this album, you have this encapsulation of what at the time is, 4 different, creative voices moving in different ways with different pursuits, different interests, and that's all being encapsulated in an album. So when it, to criticize it for saying it's disjointed, in actuality, the record is disjointed almost by intention. Maybe they intended for this to be a more cohesive, more, plain, straightforward project. But at the end of the day, the only way to portray the Beatles, portray who they were, portray who they were becoming, portray what they wanted to produce, they had to make this disjointed, extremely, lopsided, strange recording. Infamously with these recording sessions, Lennon, McCartney, Harrison, they'd all be recording different songs, and they'd all, be pulling Ringo in for their session or for the song they wanted to do that day. They were all doing their own sort of thing, and then, only deciding at the end, to come together and arrange this album, find a, way to try and bring it all together. If you were to attempt this sort of project, you're never going to get something that sounds cohesive. It would be an immense coincidence if at the end of this, diverse, split, separate recording process, you ended up with something that encapsulated, a cohesive one-way vision, like you saw on Sgt. Pepper's or like you'd see on their later album. Instead, what you're getting is this encapsulation and this portrayal of diversity and of discordance, discord, blah, blah, blah. Even with Revolution 9, Harrison and Paul McCartney didn't want Lennon to put it on the album. They didn't want him to include it. They I think they respected the song. I think they liked what it was doing. They kind of understood the purpose of it, but they didn't, want to alienate their fans. And I guess they were, in retrospect, they almost were right in a sense. People hate the song. It's wildly reviled, hugely criticized, and they probably saw that coming. But, Lennon, that was the thing he wanted to incorporate into the record. That was, his creative pursuit at the time. He was doing lots of similar sort of sonic experimentation with Yoko Ono. And so he wanted to portray this sort of thing. And, it would be false to say the Beatles is encapsulated by an album that doesn't have Revolution 9 on it, doesn't have Lennon who's going into a more experimental, avant-garde direction. It would be wrong to, pretend that this is an encapsulation of who the Beatles are and not include that song that's capturing this very, very important, artistic development by Lennon.
Number 9, number 9, number 9, number 9.
Obviously that on its own, I don't think justifies the song necessarily being there, We don't need, people don't buy the White Album to listen to, the perfect encapsulation of who the Beatles are. But I do think that because of this meta thing going on in the album, that Revolution 9 is actually very, very important. If you listen to the adjectives I've been using to describe the album, diverse, messy, discordant, that's what Revolution 9, in a sonic sense really is. It is this highly unorganized, highly, messy, disturbed sort of song that gets placed at the end of the album to try and encapsulate that feeling. It's this perfect portrayal of what the album up until this point has actually been. It's been this, this random structure with these some, underlying organized structure you can kind of just only feel intuitively. There's different motifs between different songs in the White Album, and in that same sense, Revolution 9 is only built off of different audio sonic tape motifs. They're both being built off of this, random organization that only in post is actually being, tried to construe into something coherent. And I think adding on to that, there's also this sense of anxiety that's playing throughout the entire album. I think there's a few songs that are just like genuinely unsettling, and I think that sort of unsettling feeling carries through the entire track list. And then you have a song that essentially is only the unsettling feeling. It's only the anxiety. It's only the fear. It's only the neuroticism that's been building up throughout the course. It's finally this release to what we've been having hinted at the entire record. Every single other song also up until this point has included, maybe multiple Beatles at the same time. All four of them have lead vocal in at least one song, but no other song at this point has had all four Beatles in the same song. And this technically, while there's no vocalist, there's no, singing in a traditional sense, all the voices of all four Beatles are included in this sort of tape loop mesh that the song actually is. While it is certainly a singular encapsulation of Lennon's artistic pursuits at the time, it still, has hints of the entire Beatles who created this record, who made us, get to this point. If we look at other superficial comparisons, the White Album is pretty easily the Beatles' longest record, I think by pretty much a mile. And the White Album, well, they have songs that, approach it in length, and they do have some, unofficial, unreleased or archival or whatever recordings that might top it out. White Album is their longest, major release song by also another decent margin. It's fitting that this encapsulation of their longest work is, in another sense, another one of their longest works in a, micro sense. Now I can, of course, describe these like higher order, abstract things that are supposedly making the song better. But what I really think the most important thing this song does for the album is sequencing. Now, when I, said previously, the White Album is this discordant, messy abstraction, I really am wrong in the sense that it does feel like a cohesive experience front to back. Now, obviously, it makes big jumps. There's not like logical through lines or explanations, why Bungalow Bill goes into While My Guitar Gently Weeps, goes into Happiness is a Warm Gun. But that progression feels natural. That progression feels, it feels like some intuitive sense. I'm having trouble putting it into words. Some intuitive sense, it feels like it works and it feels satisfying to listen to. And I think what the most important thing Revolution 9 does is it finds a way to finally end the record. The White Album, in terms of organization, could theoretically last a whole other hour, just in terms of, how things are structured. You keep just adding songs and songs and songs. But it would be hard to find a way to finish it. It would be hard to find a way to actually, present some finality to the whole experience. And I think because Revolution 9 encapsulates that entire emotionality and that entire struggle, essentially, present in the record, because it is so discordant and because it really brings that anxiety to the forefront, it's able to serve as a way to end the record. It is, even if you dislike it, it's strong enough, it's going to leave you with some impression at the end of the day. And that impression is enough to sort of loop you back, kind of take you out of the experience, confound you, confuse you, to the point where you're ready when the next song is the epilogue, When Goodnight is the final song. You're at the point you feel like you've traversed something, you've made this experience, you feel like you reach some climax, whether or not you enjoyed that climax or not. The White Album, I feel like if it didn't have, if you just cut out Revolution 9, it would just kind of end. There wouldn't be this, you know, emotionality or this strength or this finality to it. It would just kind of end with good night, and, you know, you just kind of feel like it would still be a great record. And I mean, most people love this album who hate this song. So I mean, obviously they would still be getting a lot out of it. But I think it's finally the point where the entire progression feels like it boils over into something else. Like the album you could not put Revolution 9 halfway through the album. You could not put it, you know, as the first song. It has to be this final moment of explosiveness. And I think that's what it does best. I think that's why I respect the song so much, even beyond just, you know, the experience of listening to it. And with that, I'll conclude this video. Thank you. I'm hoping to make some more videos, of course, to everyone. I'm so glad the reception to the other videos have been great. I feel bad for taking so long to make these videos. I want to do maybe more like freeform, explanatory analysis videos like this one. But also I want to do like some more bigger projects too. I want to do like larger, long-length album reviews and maybe some more list videos. I know obviously those do well and people enjoy them. So anyways, glad you enjoyed the video. If you've watched this long, you know, this disorganized mess, then I applaud you. Thank you.